welcome to all our attendees this morning. We really appreciate the fact that you have always taken the time out of your Tuesday mornings to join us for these Toolbox talks. We also want to say a very big thank you once again to our sponsors, that is IOPSA, the Institute of Plumbing South Africa, for the amazing work that they are doing out in the industry, not only for plumbing, but also in the interest of occupational health and safety. We also want to say thank you to SIOSH as well as PRB for accrediting these Toolbox talks with CPD points. So if you are a member of SIOSH or PRB, please don't forget to organize your CPD points from them. We have got a small change for today. Well, it's actually quite a big change. We have changed the entire topic for today. We were going to discuss audits, but if you'd like to know a little bit more about audits, please reach out to me, and we are just going to be moving that topic over to another day. The reason for the change is because of the amount of questions relating to the exact same topic that we have gotten from you out in the industry. And as we've mentioned, these Toolbox talks have been designed for you because of you. Really, you are the one that wants to know certain things that affect you and affect your business in the interest of health and safety. And we just really want to make sure that we give you the best content possible. Now, the question that's come in is, if one of my employees does contract COVID-19, what are the procedures that we must follow? Now, when COVID-19 hit and the pandemic started with us, we went through that phase of complete lockdown. Nobody really knew what to do. And slowly, the government started releasing certain documentation, such as regulations from your Disaster Management Act, and that came to the C19 or the COVID-19 OHS 2020 regulation that we have currently. And that's really the driving force, but there's been a lot of changes as well as some clarities on some miscommunications. Now, I must admit, I did the exact same thing, even with a deep cleaning and the certificate that needed to be given in to the Department of Health. We got that directive. It was coming via email, via social media, and we were running around trying to figure out how we go about performing not only the deep clean, but getting that certificate of acceptance from the Department of Health. And it was quite a difficult one until the clarity came out from the Department of Health, which stated that they do not require a certificate of disinfection. So that has changed a lot for us. They've given us a new directive on what deep cleaning really is. And this is what we want to chat to you about today. So there's a few steps that we must take if one of your employees is tested positive for COVID-19, you've gotten the results back, or perhaps they are showing signs and symptoms and you are not quite sure if it is mild or severe. So here are some things that you must do according to the Department of Health as well as the Department of Labor. And this comes directly from the government directive that we have in terms of the C19 2020 OHS regulations that has been derived from your Disaster Management Act, as well as a few letters directly from the Department of Health and the Department of Labor. So we've got some reference work at the end of this Toolbox talk as well for you. We are going to be cutting it at 20 to 25 minutes once we've discussed information with you. But the Toolbox talk itself, with the question and answers, as well as all the references, will be made available to you either on the Dropbox, or you can drop me an email and I can send it to you in PDF version as well. Well, here are some of the steps that you must take. As soon as an employee has tested positive, you need to do a reporting system. Now, first of all, we report it obviously to the Department of Health, and we can use that COVID-19 hotline. And then, depending if it is a work-related or occupational incident where the person is now sick because of their occupation, it then becomes a reportable disease to the Department of Labor. And then you've got to fill in your WCL1 form and submit it as normal. Then you must get that person treatment. It's extremely important that a person who is showing those signs and symptoms or has been tested as positive gets the treatment that they deserve, so that they can obviously get well and come back to work and return to normal life with their family. We also need to investigate the incident. Why did it happen? How did it happen? And then that moves on to the next point of tracing This tracing is to ensure that others who may have come in contact with that person when they might not have been showing signs and symptoms, but still being infected, could have contaminated or cross-contaminated another person, or perhaps even items and things, surfaces inside the workshops or offices where they are working. And that will then move us into the cleaning and disinfection part of it. And that's where we come out with, is it a requirement from the Department of Health to go and get an outside company in to come and do this huge fumigation and disinfection, issue you a certificate, and then get a valid certificate from the Department of Health to say that you can go back to work? Well, what is the regulation behind that? And then, is it a mild case or is it a severe case? And what does that mean? And what are you going to do when it is a mild case only? In other words, the person is showing signs and symptoms that they may have COVID-19, or it is a severe case where the person is actually infected with COVID-19. Now, why do we say mild and severe? Well, many people do get allergies this time of year, they do get fevers this time of year, and they do get the flu this time of year. Does that necessarily mean they have COVID-19? No, not necessarily. However, if they are showing those same symptoms, we just want to lean on the side of caution and make sure that the person does not, in fact, have it, so that we do not infect anyone else. So really, we've got a risk-based view of how we go about or how we approach the situation where a person has been tested either for symptoms or in fact been tested with COVID-19. So let's do a quick little flow chart of what you are going to be doing as the employer, as the person responsible, perhaps even the person himself that has contracted these symptoms, or perhaps even COVID-19. The first thing to do, as we mentioned, is the report. This is a written report stating the who and the where of the positive results and where it came from. So obviously it's going to be all your information, the employer's information, the employee's information, the addresses and so forth. Now, don't think that automatically you're going to be shut down. So please don't feel that way. Nobody has the right to come and shut down your building unless the Department of Health views it as a critical case. Now, we work in terms of risk, and the Department of Health and the Department of Labor are working hand in hand with risk management. Essentially, that is what COVID-19 disaster plan is all about. It's addressing the risk. So if it is a low risk, well, work can continue on as normal. If it is a medium risk, then stricter protocols must be in place. If it is a high risk, well, then you might have to close for a certain period of time. If it is a critical risk, well, then obviously they might close down the building completely until they tell you when to open. So this is how you need to address someone who has been affected in your business. You need to understand what is the risk rating. And it's very simple. You might think to yourself, do I have to go and do a full risk assessment? Yes, there are parts where you must do a risk assessment, but it is not algorithms and numbers that you have to fill in this time. It's really just doing the procedures as the Department of Health has issued, going through these steps, reporting, isolating, looking at your workplace and performing your recovery. And by that way, you will then be instituting your elimination, substitution, as well as administrative and PPE forms of the hierarchy of control when it comes to risk. So when we say reporting, again, that is directly to the Department of Health. And as we mentioned, if it is a reportable illness because the person has gotten COVID-19 because of performing his occupation, then it becomes an occupational disease. Now you have to report it to the Department of Labor, and you will start claiming from the COID, the compensation for occupational injuries and disease. This is then notified to the Department of Labor using a WCL1 form, and your company must keep a record of the actual incident, because the person who has gotten ill, as well as your investigation, that will then form part of your Annexure 1. That Annexure 1 is a government document. It is also loaded onto the Dropbox if you need it. If you don't have it, drop me a mail and I'll send you these documents in PDF form as well. Then make sure you call the hotline in order to give you the exact procedure to follow in getting that person from reporting that he is sick to the next part where you actually want to get this person treatment. Now, the first thing we need to do, obviously, in getting the person treatment is isolating that person. We do not want that person to come in contact with others. So the recommendation, actually the guidelines from the regulations, is to immediately give that person a mask. Now, it's obvious that the person should have a mask, but it is just a requirement that that person continue to wear the mask in isolation. Remove them from the area that they are currently infecting, but please do not take them home or take them to another area, crowded area. Don't take them directly to the hospital. The reason for that is this person now potentially has COVID-19. If you introduce them into a new environment, you could potentially be spreading that virus. So wait for the Department of Health, or actually your local hospital, to tell you when to come in with that person. That person, when he has been found positive on the day, you do have time. The person is not going to fall down right there. So please just remember, they will get the treatment and they will get better. We just need to follow the protocols so that we don't infect others. Now, what if the person is only going to get into the hospital the next day, which is often the case? Well, in this instance, you would want to ensure that when you do take them home, their family knows that this person has the potential to have COVID-19. He will still then continue to perform all those safety protocols at home. In other words, you will make sure that they have his mask, his sanitizer, and the social distancing, even with their family. The Department of Health, however, has set up isolation venues, and that is why we suggest getting in touch with them through their hotline, and they will then instruct you where to go to isolate the person, or if there is a treatment facility available already. When they have gotten to the point of getting treatment from the hospital, this is where the support structure must come in. Health support for employees is extremely important, and it mustn't just come from their family. It should come from you as the employer and employees as well. You do not visit that person, but you can keep in touch with them and their family. In other words, supporting means making them realize that they are not only valued, but they are not discriminated in any way because of the current situation that they are in. We need to give them that emotional support as well as mental support for the situation that they are currently going through. And remember, as an employer, you have to issue that person with sick leave. And this is because the basic conditions of employment require that person to go on sick leave. So they should still be getting paid, even though they are out of commission. And it is in the question and answer section of this Toolbox talk. You will see exactly where in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act it explains to you that you need to perform this and issue the person with proper sick leave. We then move on to the next part of investigating inside the workplace. Well, for one, we conduct a full investigation. Now, when we say full, it is not asking where did he get it from and stopping there. We need to investigate where was the person, what did he touch, where did he walk inside the actual building, and this comes down to our risk of the actual contamination or the risk of cross-contamination. If this person was a receptionist and they moved in and around the reception area, the canteen area, and probably the ablution facilities, well, then only really that area is then going to be disinfected. And then we are going to start doing our tracing. Who came in contact with a receptionist? Was it direct contact, touching, being closer than 1.5 to 2 meters? Did they in any time stand next to each other or come in contact with each other without masks on? Remember, practicing social distancing, having your barriers, your physical barriers, as well as your mask on, protect you to a very, very large degree. So just because that person was in your office does not necessarily mean that you have a high risk of contaminating COVID-19. That would mean that it is a high risk to go to your local shopping center because you are walking in and around potential ones who may have COVID-19. Well, it does become a high risk if you do not wear your mask, if you do not practice social distancing, and if you do not sanitize or wash your hands often. So if you are performing these things inside your office and the person is only walking through and not having much cross-contamination by touching too many things, well, then you have a very low risk. And in this instance, just go and do manual disinfection of your own. Ensure you are cleaning either with your bleach products or the ammonium chloride. Some of you are using the alcohol products. These will all effectively disinfect the area. You do not have to get an outside company to do this. Now, once you've done your tracing and you've figured out where the person is and you are starting to perform this full clean of that specific area where that person might have been in, you may feel necessary for your own protection that you would like to disinfect your entire office. Well, what does that mean for you? What is a deep clean? Well, the Department of Health has issued a requirement of what a deep clean means and which areas need to be cleaned in order to be constituted a deep clean. And here you have two options. Option number one, companies out there have changed from performing normal duties to taking on the duties of deep cleaning and sanitizing in order to have an actual income. So you can support your local companies out there that are doing this. They can come in and perform a deep clean for you. We just want to give you a little bit of a suggestion. Ensure that the person or company that is coming out to deep clean gives you an MSDS of the actual chemicals that they are using. And this is just because you want to ensure that it is the right chemical to, first of all, disinfect, and that they are using the correct procedure, as well as a checklist that they have checked all the areas to be cleaned as per the deep clean directive from the Department of Health. Now, it's a very simple checklist. There's maybe 10 to 20 things that need to be checked inside an office that has been cleaned. Let them tick it off, sign it, and that essentially becomes your certificate, if you want to call it that. That checklist essentially tells you that these areas have been cleaned and disinfected. Should you have that, there is no need to give that to the Department of Health or to issue or to receive a certificate of disinfection from the Department of Health. Your second option is to do all of that yourself. Now, you might be asking, well, how do I go about doing this? Where do I get a checklist? Don't stress. We have already arranged and designed those checklists for you. So we've got the directive from the Department of Health. I will be uploading it during the course of today or tomorrow on the Dropbox. And if you would like to get your hands on this checklist, drop me an email and I will send that PDF copy through to you as well. Really, you're ticking it off, but please ensure that you are following the SSOP, the Standard Safe Operating Procedure for disinfection, and I will include that in the checklist for you as well. Now, when we get to the recovery phase, this is when we take a look if it is mild or severe. As we mentioned, a mild case is someone who is showing the symptoms. There is a very big possibility in your mind they've been diagnosed, they are positive for COVID, you've checked their temperature, they've answered yes to some of your questions on the screening questionnaire, and now you're in panic mode. Well, this does not necessarily mean they have COVID-19. They may just be showing symptoms of another illness, but we side with the side of caution. A mild case means they are showing symptoms, and after 14 days, after they've had symptoms, and they no longer show any symptoms, well, they can return to work. So they isolate themselves because they're feeling sick. They get tested. They are not positive for COVID-19, but they are still showing signs and symptoms. Well, that person should essentially not really be at work. They are not positive. 14 days after their symptoms, they can then return to work. In a severe case, it is a person who has now contracted COVID-19. They have tested positive. You've sent them into isolation. They've received treatment. Only 14 days after they are clinically stable, which means they have no symptoms or there is no more critical medical intervention. Only then are they allowed to return to work. But when they return to work, there are certain protocols to put in place in order for restrictions to be made. And this is because a person who has tested positive may still be able to contract it again. So just remember, they might not be sick anymore, but we do not want them to get it again. The immune system is already very low, and we do not want to run the risk of that person getting reinfected. So we mentioned two things that you might have questioned or you might want to know a little bit more about, and that is the issuing of sick leave. And this is directly from the C19 OHS 2020 regulations under section 23.4. You must place your employee on paid sick leave in terms of section 22 of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Or if the employee's sick leave entitled under the section is exhausted, you need to make application for illness benefits in terms of clause 4 of the directive that was issued on the 25th of March. And this comes from the TERS Relief Fund under Regulation 10.8 of all these sections of the Disaster Management Act. Now, we know we have been having issues with that, and we do understand, but please continue to follow these directives. Ensure that the employee is not discriminated against on the grounds of having tested positive. This is extremely important. We want to support, get that employee the needed treatment as well as support that they need so that they can return to work. Now, what does a deep clean mean? Well, the checklist will have these very vital areas. Deep cleaning involves, and this comes directly from the Department of Health, we will send you that letter if you need, that is cleaning and disinfecting of walls, ventilation shafts, as well as the grills, storage areas, floors, windows, and ceilings. All areas are then cleaned, and this comes from ourselves with a dual application. We do a full wipe down as well as a disinfection of the actual atmosphere and surrounding areas, but we can send you that SSOP as well as the checklist. So to end off, here are 8 steps you can take to positively take an approach to not only risk-based thinking, but also a positive approach to what you want to achieve in your workplace. Number 1, make every effort to educate yourself and your staff. Reevaluate your access control systems, such as anything that may have a button. We do not want to use finger biometrics and things like this. Reason being is you want to have the least amount of areas being touched as possible to avoid cross-contamination. Try and automate doors. If you don't have automation, perhaps you can put someone there that can open and close it, constantly disinfecting and wiping the area and providing the needed screening for the person who is coming in. Always clear the clutter. Apart from having proven psychological benefits, a clean workplace will eliminate possible places for the virus to linger. It does last for a few days on some places, so if you clean out that clutter, it's easier for you to then clean and disinfect that area. Perhaps redesign your workplaces in order to achieve that social distancing. Have mobile hand sanitizer units available all over, and here we just want to mention soap and water is the best method. If you cannot have that, you then resort to hand sanitizer. And then restructure open plan layouts. The safest way to be in a shared place is to adhere to the 2-meter distance rule. Social distancing is extremely important. And even if you have achieved this, please remember you must still wear your mask at all times. Well, those are a few steps from ourselves, some good suggestions. We thank you very much for putting up with us, for changing our topics just as and when required. But really it is because of you out there in the industry. And we want to say a very, very big thank you to all of you attendees for reaching out, dropping us mails, sending us those WhatsApps, and also giving us a call every now and then. We thank you for your feedback as well as your comments and suggestions. Next week, we are going to be looking at the disinfectant spray that some are using and why we determine this as a hazardous substance, either because of the content of the actual chemical or because of its flammability, and what we should be then doing if we are stocking and storing quite a bit of this disinfection sprays inside of our areas. Essentially, this becomes a hotspot for a potential hazard. So we look forward to meeting with all of you next week. Please stay safe during this very difficult time. You will notice in the slide, there are a few more slides coming up for questions and answers, as well as that very important reference work. So we will send this out in PDF for you, and it will also be on the Dropbox link. You can get those questions, answers, and references as you need. So thank you very much. Have a good one, guys, and we'll see you next week.